So then, we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle Services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end as per Yeshayahu the prophet. We find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. As we read then Yeshayahu the prophet, we establish then layers of these prophecies based from, obviously, his relationship with the Almighty Creator. And then from then on, other prophets were given also, very similarly, many kinds of information regarding those particular layers related with the time of the restoration period, the autumn feast, and then post-autumn feast. But let's then understand what's going on with the world as far as we can understand then the restoration period. There are a few topics, and then as far as we can understand, Daniel the 11th chapter gives us then on the Gentile behalf the relationship of the kingdom of the north, kingdom of the east, and kingdom of the south. The 10th chapter of Daniel explains then the discovery of the nation of China. Then what can we understand as far as what we know as nations? They used to be powerful. As we can understand, there are a couple of beasts in Revelation, because the layer of these understanding comes from Revelation. And then the first was then given 800 years for Great Britain, and then the other couple of 100 years was granted then to United States. We can understand then the decline of the British Empire for some time, so we can understand also the decline of United States. What can we understand as far as the monetary system? The USD at some point must be computerized, and then the exchanges must be done instantly via computer, as US then makes a linker with the rest of the system, primarily China. So then, what can we understand as far as the kingdom of the north regarding then Daniel the 11th chapter? We can understand later then the kingdom of the north coming with much equipment. As it was explained before, equipment regarding this chapter relates with the military gear. And then, over and over again, the kingdom of the north was given then a clear path, so then they can promote their own plans, and they will be obviously prosperous. Not only what they are doing as far as military as they know of, but then the Gentile Netzer explaining then the system of socialism must return completely and must become greater than previously. There is a distinction though. As far as we can understand, there won't be a power problem regarding the new socialist system. It is absolutely for the purposes of protection of trade. That's where then the power comes from. Honest trade. So then, as far as we can read, for instance from Job and also Yeshayahu, chapter 27, we read a section regarding the Leviathan, or the marine monster. But let's then understand what this means, so then we can relate with this time when nations are restructuring themselves for the new system. What do we read, for instance, in Job chapter 40? What do we read as far as the conversation the scoundrel Job was having then with the mighty Creator? Obviously, Job was truly a scoundrel. He was not a righteous person, because he became rich. He became a true scoundrel. even the evil powers, they went up and complained with the mighty Creator, because the evil, as we know of, was complaining of Job being as evil as then the evil person was. So he was complaining before the Creator. And then Job was then obviously cleansed from his junk, and then he had the understanding of the time of the end. As we read then the 40th chapter, what can we understand as far as, for instance, the 9th verse? Can you then, making it this situation, for instance, with no validity as far as his judgment, so this is what's going on as far as his condemnation of the time of the end, because Job was nearly experiencing an ending of his life at this point. And then the Creator observed the situation and used his judgment for the time of the end, and explained a layer regarding then the time of the restoration period. What do we find these? There is then judgment, condemnation as far as justifying his action. Action of the Creator, obviously, always perfect. And then in the 40th chapter, the 31st verse, you find then, and then the merchants. You find then combat, remember, and then the combat of the end. So Job, as he was experiencing at the very end of his life, as he thought of, because of the many trials he went through, this time he was given then as an understanding of the time of the end. So then, where do we find then Leviathan? You find in the chapter after. Let's then read a portion of it. Then explains his face, then covering. Understand then a very important point regarding its mouth, regarding then the power thereof. And then seal, there is a sealing. His body was absolutely sealed, where no air can go in. Now, let's try and understand then this factor. What would be the purpose of the Creator himself explaining then his judgment, the time of the end, in that day, then the merchants on the 31st, and then explaining as far as Leviathan? Can we understand then the submarine warfare, the importance of this factor? But then, as we then read these, and we read the Yirmiyahu, the 27th verse, it has precisely the same meaning. So then, explains then the roles of these body armor that his monster has. And then, not even the air, closed air. Try to understand, this is the 8th verse of the 41st chapter. Explain then of the seal tied with one another, not even air can go in. As we understand, for instance, many of these prophecies are related with areas and times and seasons with the centuries, sometimes 1,000 years prior of our time, as we know of. And then as we read these, we must make a relation of nature and then prophecies of the future. But as we read these, you can make it truly a sense out of it, because there is obviously steps of formation. And as you read, for instance, in the 40th chapter, you read the covenant, you read then the time of the merchants, you read the combat of the end, you read, for instance, earlier the judgment, the condemnation, and then later on you find the 41st chapter mostly explaining of the submarine warfare. And then the 42nd explains then the Creator himself being the first. But then, as we shift this understanding as far as the 11th chapter of Daniel, we find then the kingdom of the north, east, and south. You find a relationship amongst them. You find in China also related, and most importantly, given then these nations the economy of China as a leading force, where then you find the kingdom of the south restructuring itself. You find then the friends of the Soviet Union rejoining them, and they must rejoin completely, and they must become higher than the first. Now, as far as what can we understand as becoming higher than the first? Well, first let's read then Daniel the 11th chapter, so then we can understand this factor, because China then plays a very important role of making then the kingdom of the north higher than the first. Firstly is then, as was explained before, then the purposes of trade. China is then the leading force of trade of this time, as then the socialist people are then in nations are gathering themselves as used to be, but this time higher than the first. They must be grander, and the submarine warfare is also involved. So then, what do we understand of warfare? Firstly then, let's read then the kingdom of the north certainly shall come with a great army and then much equipment. As far as we can understand, the word army means then a selection of military force. It's regarding the people managing equipment. It does not only mean army as far as soldiers on the ground, but it means in the air, in the ocean. Because we must understand Leviathan simply is the submarine warfare. Now, submarine warfare, is it truly for the purposes of war? No, for the protection of ships on the surface. The United States must retrieve. The United States must then retrieve. They must wane. They must become a nation of a secondary purpose. That's why we read then the despised one of Daniel. Where do we find these? Very simply, you find in the 21st verse of the 11th chapter. The United States must be the despised nation, because we are explaining, for instance, the first 800 years was given then to Great Britain, and that was then the declining of the British Empire. So at this time, the declining of the United States, given then space for China, the Soviet Union, and then Africa. Mostly then there is the work of, for instance, Che Guevara, the work of Mr. Castro regarding this topic. And then you read this section on the 7th verse of the 11th chapter, where then you find Cuba once again joining up with the Soviet Union, and then Congo with its vast resources of rare materials becoming then available for China and the friends of the new system. As it was labeled before, United States, because its lack in its inability of managing the economy, they are parasites in this world's market, in this world's economy. They are not able to manage their economy anymore, and they are becoming parasites. The USD is absolutely a plague amongst the nations because of their inability of turning around their economy. These, however, shows us the importance of the new system. You find then China becoming stronger and stronger and stronger, and then you find the sons of Ishmael obviously receiving their stick of authority as China makes a deal with them, and then the Ishmaelites providing them the proper petroleum resources. So then the merchants of the earth under the system of China and the protection of the friends of the Soviet Union can then move on with a new system, and US must retrieve. That's the way it is. That's the way it has shown the holy instructions. You can be sure of it. These must take place. You find references of Daniel the 11th chapter. You find references in Job, the 40th, the 41st. You find it in Yeshayahu, the 27th chapter. And you find also Revelation. So then, as we understand this factor, what can we gather as far as information from the 11th chapter and the 7th verse? Simply what the Soviet Union used to be must return completely. However, as it was explained before, many of the countries of the world, they are afraid because they think they are going to be taken by force. But it's no longer the case, because we are reading from a new system of trade. Daniel the prophet also explained the 12th chapter of Daniel, at the end of the 1,000 years of deceit, or 1,000 years of roaming, where then his people were roaming without holy cities. And at the end of it, knowledge shall increase for the purposes of trade. What do we understand of this system? Computerized way of investing on products, directly products from online systems. You don't trust anymore your resources with people anymore than to do investment for you. You yourself invest on products directly related with a computerized system, and then from a link of the computer, using it and investing it then goes directly to a company. But you define, you yourself, what you want to be involved with and your money being invested on. So then, as far as New York and what they do over there with your money and the money of many nations, they are gamblers, scoundrels of the worst kind. They have destroyed the American economy over and over again, and they try to hide as much as they can, but the world already knows it. And US must retrieve. Now, should have some sort of a courage from the other nations, absolutely. The natural understanding is the Soviet Union might be a bit reluctant of receiving its former title of power and might, but not only they should receive these, but then beyond, far beyond they would ever imagine, as far as we can understand, as influence, and then becoming a very strong partner in a new system. So then, as far as the Pacific, as we can understand, Dragon Mart, the most important Chinese market of the world, is then in China, in Dubai, and all Ford was then obviously set in Dubai, and then in Cancun, Mexico, not very far away from Cuba, on the other side of the ocean. So, as we can understand the importance of the submarine warfare, US won't take it very lightly as far as what we are reading from the Holy Instructions. US wants the control of the world. The problem is they can't anymore. And as was not easy for the British Empire then to understand, they were declining. So it won't be very easy for the United States then grasp the importance of declining themselves. As the British Empire, they fought as much as they could to remain on top, and they couldn't. So US must then be involved with the same situation. So then when we read the 1,000 years of deceit in its end, you find then the despised one, the last representative of the beast at this time, then related with a facet of deceit, then becoming despised. Then the Ishmaelites. You find then, when the new system is protected by the warfare of submarines underwater, so then people don't get scared, because it's much easier under the water is submarine warfare protecting the cargo ships than on the surface. As far as the new system, you find then the sons of Ishmael contributing with petroleum. You find then the Arab world interested in the BRICS system. So if you evaluate what's going on in the world as far as then the European Union absolutely stagnated, very system led by Germany stagnated, they are not growing, not going anywhere. You find then the economy of the United States absolutely bankrupt. You find the USD as a plague and a parasite in this world system. But then we have a hope of China becoming more influence, a huge influence in this world, and becoming more influential, and then helping other countries becoming part of their own system. So then, as we can understand, China is the system of the dragon. Dragon is not a bad name, not even it's evil. It simply means precision. Using then the importance of the computer via transactional systems with transactions, where then people, they limit themselves as far as stealing, thus then providing resources for thousands of people so they can do trade via computer. A new system must be above of any kind of investor, as we know of, on taking in your money and then placing it in the hands of someone else and then gambling with it. There won't be any more gambling with someone else's money. You yourself are going to log on and invest your money precisely where you want and receiving your earnings cleanly. So then, as far as the military of the world, it's already proven that the Kingdom of the North must be the top as far as military equipment. It's the only nation we can read regarding the influence of military and protection of these systems. It does not mean that China won't have a military of influence, but explains as far as we can understand the leadership of a military or groundbreaking military leadership is then from the Northern Kingdom. This should give us then a few understandings as far as what can we expect of the near future. Firstly then, we understand the submarine base in Cuba. We understand then a submarine base on behalf of the Soviets in many parts of the Asian world, in many countries regarding then the resources of Asia. So then underwater there are obviously people watching very closely and then tracking down these cargo ships so they can reach their destinations unharmed. So the new system then can start and then be part of our economies. Next time we're going to evaluate these further, so then we can read from Revelation much later, when the system then is proven, working, and we're going to observe then areas of Babylon, for instance, and then make an evaluation with the kingdom, and then not only this, with the despised one, making a link with it. So then please stay tuned, much more coming up.